The road that twisted through the dense forest was treacherous at night. Fog hung low, and the moon was barely a sliver, offering no light to the driver speeding through the curves. The rain had just started, making the path slick. The driver, a young mother, clutched the wheel nervously, trying to reach the nearest town before the storm worsened. In the back seat, her baby slept soundly, unaware of the danger ahead. Suddenly, a deer darted onto the road. The mother swerved violently, the tires screeching against the wet asphalt. The car spun out of control, crashing headfirst into a massive oak tree. The world went still, except for the steady patter of rain and the soft wailing of the baby, now wide awake. From the forest, hidden among the trees, yellow eyes gleamed. A large gray wolf, drawn by the sound of the crash, stepped cautiously toward the wreckage. The scene was quiet, the mother unmoving. But the baby's cries tugged at something deep within the wolf. Ignoring its primal instincts, the wolf circled the car, carefully nudging the door open with its nose. The baby, bundled in blankets, was unharmed. With great care, the wolf gently grasped the child in its jaws and disappeared into the woods, leaving the wreckage behind. What compelled the wolf to save the baby? And where would it take this fragile human? The wolf moved swiftly through the forest, weaving between trees and over roots, as if it had run these paths 1,000 times. It carried the baby delicately, feeling the faint pulse of life in the tiny body it now protected. The moonlight occasionally broke through the canopy, casting long, eerie shadows that danced in time with the wolf's movement. It was not a place for humans, yet here the child was, vulnerable and alone. As the wolf ran deeper into the forest, it passed landmarks only known to the creatures of the woods. A massive boulder covered in moss, a twisted tree shaped like a claw, and finally a hidden clearing. This place was sacred, untouched by humans for centuries. The wolf paused, setting the baby down gently in the soft grass. Strange whispers filled the air, as if the trees themselves were alive, watching the scene unfold. The wolf paced around the child, its sharp eyes scanning the perimeter for any sign of danger. But something else was happening. A power older than the forest seemed to stir, recognizing the presence of the child and the wolf's unusual act of kindness. The baby cooed softly, staring up at the sky through the branches. The wolf lay beside the infant, its body a protective barrier against the outside world. There was something different about this child. The wolf sensed it. It wasn't just an ordinary human. This child was special, connected to the forest in ways that would soon become apparent. But for now, all the wolf could do was watch over it, waiting for the forest to reveal its secrets. Dawn broke slowly, casting a golden glow over the forest. The wolf remained by the baby's side, standing guard throughout the night. As the sun's rays filtered through the trees, the sounds of the forest grew louder. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, and in the distance the soft patter of paws. The rest of the wolf pack had arrived. 6 wolves emerged from the underbrush, their eyes glowing with curiosity and caution. They approached their leader, the gray wolf who had broken the pack's most fundamental rule: never interfere with humans. The pack moved silently, their eyes shifting from the baby to the gray wolf, as if questioning its choice. A large black wolf, the alpha, stepped forward and growled softly, demanding an explanation. The gray wolf stood tall, meeting the alpha's gaze without fear. Though it could not speak, its actions had already spoken volumes. The baby was under its protection now. The pack hesitated, unsure of what to make of the strange creature that had been brought into their midst. The baby gurgled, waving its tiny hands at the wolves, unafraid. For a moment, the tension broke. The pack members exchanged glances, as if they too could sense that something far greater was at play. The forest had chosen this child for a reason, though none of them knew why. After a long pause, the alpha lowered its head, accepting the baby as part of the pack. For now. Days passed, and the baby grew accustomed to life in the forest. Under the care of the wolves, it thrived in ways no one could have expected. The gray wolf, who had found the baby, took on the role of its protector, never leaving its side. The rest of the pack slowly grew more comfortable around the child, though they kept their distance. The baby, however, was fearless. It crawled toward the wolves with innocent curiosity, tugging at their fur and babbling in a language only it seemed to understand. The pack, once wary, now seemed charmed by the child. Even the alpha occasionally allowed the baby to climb onto its back, watching with a bemused expression as it played. The forest itself seemed to respond to the baby's presence. Plants grew more vibrant, and animals that would have normally fled from wolves now lingered in the trees, as if watching over the child. The wolves noticed this change, but they did not question it. There was an unspoken understanding that the baby belonged to the forest now, and the forest would protect its own. Yet there was something more. The child had a connection to the forest that went beyond simple survival. Strange things began to happen when the baby was near. Trees swayed without wind, and the ground seemed to pulse with life. The wolves felt it too, a power unlike anything they had ever known. The baby was growing, and with it, so was its influence over the forest. Word of the missing baby eventually reached the nearby towns. Search parties combed through the forest, desperate to find the child. They searched the roads and rivers, calling out the baby's name, unaware that the child was safe, hidden deep within the forest's embrace. One evening, as the wolves lay with the baby in their clearing, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. Humans. The wolves' ears perked up, and they growled softly. The baby, sensing their unease, began to whimper. The gray wolf nudged the child, calming it with a gentle nuzzle. The humans grew closer, their voices loud and clumsy. "We have to find that baby," one of them shouted, frustration and fear lacing his voice. The alpha wolf signaled for the pack to retreat deeper into the forest. They moved swiftly and silently, carrying the baby with them. The gray wolf, with the child securely in its jaws, led the way, avoiding detection. The humans, unaware of the wolves' presence, continued their search. But they would never find the baby. The forest had hidden it well, and the wolves knew every inch of this land. They disappeared into the shadows, leaving the search party behind. But the wolves knew it was only a matter of time before the humans ventured too far. The balance between the human world and the forest was fragile, and the wolves were determined to protect their new charge at any cost. The wolves had moved deeper into the forest, far beyond the reach of human search parties. They ventured into areas even they had rarely gone before, drawn by an invisible force that seemed to protect the baby. As they traveled, the forest itself seemed to change. The trees grew taller and the underbrush became denser. The air was thick with ancient magic, a power the wolves had always respected but never truly understood. The gray wolf, with the baby still nestled in its fur, led the pack into a secluded valley. At the center of the valley was an enormous tree, its roots sprawling out like giant arms, and its bark etched with strange symbols. This was no ordinary place. The wolves had heard legends about this part of the forest, a place where the barrier between worlds was thin, where the spirits of the land watched over all creatures. As the wolves approached, the baby began to giggle, its eyes wide with wonder. The child reached out toward the ancient tree, and as its small fingers touched the bark, a faint glow spread across the surface. The wolves froze, watching in awe. The tree responded to the baby's touch, its branches swaying as if greeting an old friend. The wolves didn't understand the full significance of what was happening, but they knew this was more than mere coincidence. The forest had chosen this child for a reason, but what that reason was and what role the wolves would play remained a mystery. The baby was connected to the forest's deepest secrets, and soon those secrets would begin to reveal themselves. As the pack rested beneath the ancient tree, a strange mist began to rise from the ground. It swirled around them, wrapping the clearing in a veil of mystery. The wolves, usually unafraid of anything, became tense. But the baby was calm, giggling as it reached out to the mist. Then out of the fog, a figure appeared. A woman, her body made of shimmering light and leaves, her eyes glowing with the wisdom of the forest itself. The wolves lowered themselves in respect, recognizing her as one of the ancient spirits that had guarded the forest for centuries. The spirit approached the baby, her gaze soft but curious. "This child," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of leaves, "is not just human. The forest has called to it, and now it belongs to the old ways." The gray wolf stepped forward, its eyes locked with the spirit's. Though it couldn't speak, the spirit seemed to understand. "You have done well, guardian," she said, acknowledging the wolf's role in saving the child. "But the time has come for the baby to learn its true purpose. The forest has great plans for this one." The wolves listened in silence as the spirit explained the child's destiny. Born of human blood but tied to the magic of the forest, The baby would one day bridge the gap between the human world and the wild. But first, it had to survive the dangers that were coming. Dangers from both humans and the unseen forces that lurked in the dark. The wolves, now bound to the child by something greater than instinct, knew their mission was far from over. While the wolves learned of the baby's connection to the forest, the humans had not given up their search. Rumors had begun to spread about strange sightings in the woods, ghostly lights, unnatural sounds, and eerie visions. Some believed the baby had died in the crash. Others, however, whispered of darker things. A group of hunters, skilled in navigating the forest's treacherous paths, had taken it upon themselves to track down the wolves. Unlike the search parties before, these men were not just looking for the baby. They were also after the wolves themselves, seeing them as a threat to their villages. Armed with rifles and traps, the hunters ventured into the forest, guided by tales of the wolves' supernatural powers. As they moved deeper, they began to notice signs: paw prints, broken branches, and the distant howls of the pack. They were close. The wolves, sensing the danger, gathered around the baby. The gray wolf knew it had to act quickly. Leaving the pack in the safety of the hidden valley, the gray wolf slipped into the shadows, determined to lead the hunters away. The forest, alive with magic, responded to the wolf's silent call. The trees seemed to shift, paths disappearing and reappearing as the wolf ran. But the hunters were persistent, driven by their fear of the unknown and their desire to conquer the wild. The wolf knew it could not evade them forever. The baby's safety depended on more than just the pack's strength. It was time for the forest to intervene. As the hunters closed in, the forest began to show its true power. The trees seemed to move, blocking the hunters' path and confusing their sense of direction. Shadows darted between the branches, and the air grew thick with an unnatural fog. The hunters, though experienced, began to feel uneasy, but their determination outweighed their fear. They set traps and laid in wait, believing they could outsmart the wolves. What they didn't realize was that the forest itself was watching them. The spirit of the woods, the same one who had spoken to the wolves, now moved through the mist, her eyes fixed on the intruders. Suddenly, one of the hunters cried out in alarm. His leg had been caught in a root that seemed to move on its own, tightening around him like a snake. Another hunter found his rifle jammed, as if the very metal had rusted in his hands. Panic spread through the group. From the shadows, the gray wolf watched, its eyes glowing with the knowledge that the forest was protecting them. The baby, still hidden with the pack, was safe for now. But the hunters, desperate and terrified, began to lash out. They fired blindly into the trees, their bullets striking nothing but bark and leaves. The forest, now fully awake, retaliated. Vines lashed out, branches broke, and the ground beneath their feet shifted. One by one, the hunters were driven back, retreating in fear. The forest had won this battle, but the wolves knew it was only a matter of time before the humans returned with greater force. With the hunters gone, the wolves returned to the clearing beneath the ancient tree. The baby, unharmed, was waiting for them. The spirit of the woods appeared once more, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "This child," she said, "is the key to the future. The balance between the human world and the forest has been broken, but through this child, it can be restored." The gray wolf, now fully understanding its role, lay down beside the baby, knowing that it had done everything it could to protect the child. The rest of the pack gathered around, forming a circle of protection. The spirit smiled, her form flickering like a dying flame. "The time will come when the child must choose between two worlds," she said, "but until then, the forest will keep watch." As the wolves settled in for the night, the baby reached out, its tiny hand resting on the wolf's fur. The child's destiny was uncertain, but one thing was clear. It was no longer just a human child. It was part of the forest now, and its future held powers beyond imagination. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the secrets of the forest far and wide. The story of the wolves and the baby would be told for generations, a tale of loyalty, magic, and the mysterious bond between humans and the wild.